Playing Monster Hunter Wilds on the ROG Ally X made my experience with it a lot better. To understand why I enjoy playing this game so much on the ROG Ally X, you first have to understand where my connection to Monster Hunter actually comes from. I started playing Monster Hunter back with Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. The game came out on the 3DS and the Wii U. I never had a Wii U, so I played it on the 3DS. And I absolutely loved it. I originally discovered it through one of my favorite YouTubers, Zombie, in a Let's Play together with GLP and Devitor. And I just completely fell in love with the game. I remember thinking, oh my god, I need to play this so badly. And after begging my parents a little bit, I finally got it. Back then, when you didn't have your own money yet, you couldn't just buy 10 or 20 games a year. You had a few key moments, your birthday, Easter, Christmas, where you could wish for a game. So you basically had a budget of maybe 2 or 3 games a year. And that made it all the more incredible when the game had virtually infinite content and, more importantly, really good content. That was something Monster Hunter absolutely delivered for me back then. Ever since, I've been a massive fan of the series. I actually missed out on Monster Hunter 4, but mostly because I was still so deeply immersed in 3 Ultimate, and I didn't even notice the 4th game had come out. I wasn't really in the gaming news loop back then, but after that, with World, Rise, Generations, Ultimate, and now Wilds, I followed and to a certain degree absolutely loved every single game. So I definitely know both old school and modern Monster Hunter. And for me, it all started on a handheld. With the exception of World, Monster Hunter has always lived on handhelds for me. I played both Generations Ultimate and Rise on the Nintendo Switch and mostly in handheld mode. Let's be honest, I grew up with the 3DS and the Game Boy, so handheld gaming is what feels most natural to me. Which brings us to Monster Hunter Wilds. Monster Hunter Wilds was the second game in the series we built as a massive AAA title. Just like World back then. Naturally, I was super hyped because World was an absolute masterpiece. It didn't just modernize the visuals and elevate the game graphics wise, but also in terms of animation and overall presentation. It was such a massive leap forward. Because of that, my expectations for Monster Hunter Wilds were sky high. I was expecting that next big next-gen leap, and honestly, when I first played it, I was pretty disappointed. At that point in my life, I had already given up on having a gaming PC. I had stepped into my professional career, was using a Mac Mini, and was trying to figure out, okay, I really want to play Monster Hunter Wilds, but what platform do I even play it on? I decided to look on eBay for a relatively cheap used PS5 Slim, which was basically the most affordable option at the time. Since Monster Hunter used to jump between Nintendo and PlayStation, I figured the game would feel right at home on PlayStation. What I quickly realized though was that just like on PC, games simply didn't run very well on the PS5 Slim unless you had the super expensive PS5 Pro. And unless you were looking closely at the lighting or monster models, the game on the PS5 Slim honestly didn't look much better than World. In fact, the overall image fidelity on the Slim felt really washed out and blurry. It was the first real downer. But honestly, I'm not a graphics snob. As long as the game runs reasonably smoothly and manages to convey a good feel through its gameplay, I'm on board. So I could have lived with that. But then other things started stacking up. Overall, I really liked the numerous stuff, but then came the whole open world approach. To this day, I don't really understand why this game suddenly needed to be open world. I thought we are over with every game has to be an open world game, but evidently we are not. Let's be honest, nobody plays Wilds as an actual open world game. Everyone plays it the exact same way as World. You want to hunt a monster, you open the map, you select a monster, and you fast travel to that area. The large zones could have easily been separate maps with fast load time, just like in World. And it would have worked perfectly fine. Instead, you have all these open world elements surrounding it. It just don't really click for me. Then, after finishing the low rank story, you enter high rank, where older monsters start returning, and honestly, that part disappointed me too. The first couple of editions like Guardian, Odogoran, and Anianat were awesome, 2 of my absolute favorites from World, but the rest of the high rank cruiser, I just couldn't get into it. I know Jan Kutko has its fanbase in the community, but personally, I can't stand it. To me, it's just the annoying bird that constantly tramples over you. When I think back to Monster Hunter Rise, which I loved, even if some people criticize its mechanics, it had such an incredible roster. You had cool new monsters designed around Japanese folklore plus classic staples like Mitsune, Nagakuga, Barriov, Zinogre, and Tigrix. Absolute top tier monsters. I really wished Wilds had more of that. Having something like Barriot in the game would have hit so much harder than a Yankutku. I get that Capcom wanted to mix things up and bring back different monsters since Iceborne and Rise were packed with the usual staples, but there's a reason those monsters were in Iceborne and Rise. They are just fantastic monsters. On top of that came the endgame mechanics with the Artian weapons. It's nice that they tried something new, but they whole gacha style gambling to farm individual parts for god rolls felt totally unmotivating. Monster Hunter has always been about hunting monsters for style, for fashion, crafting cool armor sets and weapons, replacing that with a system where you constantly slay awesome creatures just to end up using a generic mechanical robot weapon that has nothing to do with the monster completely ruined that loop for me. All of this eventually led me to a point where after the first title update, which I actually really enjoyed, and oh man, as a Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate player, seeing Lagiacrus again had me so hyped. I realized I was only keeping this PlayStation for a single game. So I decided it made more sense to sell the PS5 while I could still get good money for it, which I did. Then came the second problem. The DLC was announced, and suddenly I had that itch to play again. The title updates had already teased me because they looked really, really good, and when the DLC was revealed, I thought to myself, man, I really want to play this next year. So the question was back. Okay, what do I play this on now? The PS5 Slim was out of the question after my experience with it, and I definitely didn't want to spend all that money on a PS5 Pro. I briefly considered playing on a Nintendo Switch when a simultaneous release drops, but knowing how heavy these games are, I had serious doubts about performance. And since I didn't want a big desktop gaming PC taking up space again, my attention fell on the ROG Ally X. I watched a few reviews and benchmarks. The game didn't run mind-blowingly fast, but it looked good enough that I decided to give it a shot. I rented one first, and I was shocked to find out that a performance patch had dropped earlier in the year, and holy crap, that patch unlocked so much performance. I'm playing in 70 watt TDP mode, as you can see in the overlay at the top, and the game is running consistently above 30 FPS. If we take a quick look at the setting, it's mostly running on medium settings, even with ray tracing set to low, which was my latest experiment. Even with ray tracing on, the game runs smoothly above 30 FPS without any major stuttering, and as you can see in the footage here, during a Guardian or the Goron story fight, which has lots of fast movement and particle effects, it performs surprisingly well and looks fantastic. You have to remember that what you're seeing in this video is the 900p image scaled up to a big screen for YouTube. On the small screen of the ROG Ally X, the game looks unbelievably crisp and sharp with these settings. I literally shot a quick half-minute clip with my phone holding the Ally X just to show it, but even then it's hard to capture how good it looks in person. The performance update did absolute wonders for this handheld, and that brings me right to the main point. Replaying the story on the ROG Ally X to prepare for the DLC has completely transformed my experience. Aside from the image fidelity looking way sharper and less washed out on the PS5 Slim, my overall experience with the game is just night and day. Don't get me wrong, the story still annoys me with keeping you from playing the game actively because you have to jump from hunt to hunt or aren't allowed to roam the world as you want. But being able to sit down on the couch in the evening after a long day, just like I used to do with Rise, and casually farm a monster for an hour to gather materials feels 100 times better than having to dedicate specific time at a desk or in front of a TV console in full focus mode. Monster Hunter for me is fundamentally a handheld game. I didn't realize it as strongly with World, but it really is a handheld experience at its core. The whole game loop makes so much more sense when you can just comfortably sit anywhere with it. You can take it anywhere, and if you own a handheld like this, I highly recommend giving it a try. It really feels like the trend we are seeing right now with people picking up Game Boy Advances, playing on their Nintendo DS, or reviving their PS Vitas. It just gives you that warm, cozy feeling of curling up on the couch or lying in a bed when you're tired, having instant access to your game without a heavy commitment. It feels relaxed, low friction, and not so focus demanding. And Monster Hunter as a franchise benefits hugely from that. Maybe that's why I loved it so much on the 3DS and played Rise in handheld mode on the Switch. Monster Hunter is a massive time sink, and hunting the same monster for the 6th time isn't always the most thrilling activity. And you don't have to formally sit down at a rig, but can just lie around comfortably and think, come on, I will slay this monster 2 more times. It chases everything. For me, it completely elevated the entire Monster Hunter Wilds experience. Don't get me wrong. I still think Wilds is flawed, and although I think it's not a bad game in all means, it's for me one of the weaker Monster Hunter titles overall. Playing it on a handheld, however, offsets so many of its shortcomings because it changes the entire way you interact with the game. I hope this gave you a good idea of why playing on the ROG Ally X was such a great experience for me, and why you might want to look into handheld gaming yourself, whether it's the Ally X or even replaying Freedom Unite on a PS Vita. It's just pure joy. And as you've seen in the background gameplay, this was all running unplugged on battery at medium settings on a 70W TDP GPU profile, and it runs surprisingly well. On that small Ally X screen, it really is an insanely cool experience.